A new biography about billionaire Elon Musk claims that the businessman disabled his company's Starlink satellite systems to thwart a Ukrainian drone attack on Russian warships near Crimea last year. The book alleges that Musk feared Moscow would retaliate with nuclear weapons. Musk began donating Starlink terminals to Ukraine in the early days of the war, a decision that the author claims Musk is now second-guessing. Let's get more on this. Let's bring in Frank Ledvich. He is a senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University and a former UK military intelligence officer. Welcome back to the program. What do you make of this claim that Musk disabled his company's Starlink satellite systems to thwart a Ukrainian drone attack on Russian warships? I mean, what questions does that raise for you?
Morning, Sarah. The first one is, how did Musk know that this attack was taking place? And what he says is that he was asked to enable satellites over Crimea, not disable them. He didn't disable them for Ukrainian purposes, and he refused that request on the basis you've outlined. The second question I would have, and this is no criticism particularly of the Ukrainians, is what were they doing planning an operation, making the assumption they would have facilities that were in question. The third interesting thing, by the way, is that the assumption behind all this is that Starlink, which certainly has coverage over the rest of Ukraine, does not seem to, or did not at that time, over Crimea itself. So lots of questions there, and no doubt the answers will feed out over the next few days.
And it's interesting, especially because on this show, you've said in the past that fighting in Ukraine is a little bit more World War I than Iraq War. So, going back in history a little bit, back to some of the basics of warfare. How essential, though, is something like Starlink, that technology, to Ukraine's odds on the battlefield?
Well, one soldier I spoke to in Ukraine said that without Starlink, we would be, well, he didn't use the term, but would be in very serious trouble, let's say. It's absolutely central and critical for connectivity. So all the strikes that you see, all the drone strikes, the artillery strikes, the communications between military units, also the communications between military units and home, they're all facilitated by this absolutely unique constellation of satellites. And without that, the sinews of warfare could not continue. To the extent it's like the First World War, in the First World War, the troops had or used telephones where they could. Second World War radios. You can't use those systems of communication now. They'd be jammed or destroyed. So you need satellite communications. You need secure satellite communications, and Starlink supplies that.
So that raises the big question here, because, I mean, the U.S. has NASA, Europe has the European Space Agency. Why have they not developed their own Starlink? Aren't they putting their own security at risk by outsourcing such technology to a private company?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. The main issue arising out of this is called dual use. So most satellite systems can be used by military or civilian users. So one example is Maxar. Maxar is a satellite, I won't say surveillance company, but overhead reconnaissance. You and I can buy their images online. The military do. They order far more high-resolution images than we do. But essentially, it's a civilian system. Same with Starlink. Same with with thousands of other systems in orbit. And Starlink is by far the most efficient communications satellite system, to the extent now that Japan, the Japanese armed forces, are considering, according to a report a couple of months ago, considering having Starlink as their communication system because it's cheaper, faster, more efficient. It has higher latency, which means the signal comes quicker than any other competing system. The one problem, of course, which is hinted in your question, is, are you devolving the key part of your defense to I won't call them the whims of Elon Musk, who the Russians have called a war criminal, but to the discretion, let's say, of a company, an oligarch's company? That's a really difficult question for a lot of defense analysts now.
Okay, Frank Ledvich, thank you so much for joining us to share that view. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much indeed, sir.